Fun fact, I went on 64 first dates in 10 months until I met my now husband on Hinge. So, this episode is part two of the lessons I learned during my dating journey. And today we're getting into your questions. I'm sharing it all, babes. Welcome back to Dating Intentionally. I'm Talia. I'm sharing no nonsense advice for navigating dating and relationships with confidence and ease. Whether you've been dating for a while or you're just getting started, I believe dating can be fun, especially when you take the pressure off and enjoy the ride. Easier said than done. I know. But that is what I am trying to help you do. So, in part one that I shared on Friday, I broke down 15 lessons that I learned from going on 150 ish dates with 64 people in under 10 months. And I realized it got a little long, so I couldn't answer the questions that I usually do at the end of the episode. So, today I'm answering your very personal and juicy questions about this journey I went on. And thank you so much for submitting. By the way, if we're not in touch already, you can reach out to me on Instagram at dating.intentionally. I love hearing from listeners. Like, if you're liking the show, if you have a question you want me to answer, if there's anything I can help you with, please reach out. Don't be a stranger. You can also comment below if you're listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube. And yeah, let's get into it. So these questions all came from Instagram. We're just going to go through them. So if you're just tuning in, part one was all about lessons I learned. I shared a little bit of backstory about where I was when I started my dating journey. Just the quick rundown is I was 29. I just got out of a breakup that I with someone that I dated for 6 years, and I took 3 months off, then got back into dating. I wanted to be single for a year. I met 64 people until I met my now husband. And I did not plan for it to be that long. I was ready to go longer, but that's just how it happened. All right, let's do it. First question. Why so many dates? I think dating became part of my social routine, which is why I went on so many. Also, I really like meeting new people. I think I was coming from a place where I felt really trapped. I just felt a little isolated in my relationship for 6 years. And I was just really excited to get to know a lot of different people. And again, it became part of my weekly routine. I didn't mean for it to become so many. It wasn't like aiming for a certain number. And that's truly just how it happened. And by the way, like I was in a relationship from age 23 to 29. So I dated before I was, before that relationship too. I just didn't track it. So it's very possible I've gone on like over 100 first dates at this point in my life. But it was fun. And that's honestly why it was so many, because it was fun. I loved it. How did you meet that many people? So I was meeting people mostly through dating apps. I used Hinge the entire time. And then I periodically went on Tinder and Bumble. I also tried Field, and I did meet people in person, right? I would approach people in the wilds. I met people at gatherings and stuff like that. So I would say most of them came from dating apps, but then a small percentage came from in person too. Where did you do these dates? So at the time, I was in Seattle, Washington. That's where I was living. I moved there from New York City to Washington with my ex during the pandemic. We lasted 8 months together there and then broke up. And I love dating because it helped me see the city, right? I was pretty new to Seattle. We moved during the pandemic, so a lot of things weren't open. And so as things were opening up and as I started dating, I was able to explore a lot more of my city, and it was awesome. I did end up having like a couple places I would always go out. Like if you're in Seattle, I went to Fremont Brewing, Stampede. Those were two of my go-to first date places that I absolutely loved. Some of the other breweries in that area were great. And I think Seattle is a great place to date if you're a woman dating men. There are a lot of guys there. There's a lot of great places to go. It's easy to get around. I mean, there's so much to do. So I was a huge fan of Seattle dating. And I think I'm really glad I stayed after my breakup because I had no reason to. I just was like, you know what? I have a feeling I'm going to like being single in this city. Were you dating multiple people at the same time? Yes. So by the end of my journey, I figured out like the perfect cadence. And this is where I landed. It took a while to get here, but I landed on I would see 3 people at once. So I would line up dates, and then once I had 3 first dates, I would not use the apps. I would let these dates play out fully until I basically said no to 1 or all 3 of them, and then I would add more people back into my rotation. So I wasn't sleeping with multiple people at the same time, really. I was just going on dates with multiple people. There were times where I had 2 dates in a day with 2 different people, usually on a weekend. And you know what? It was fine. Like, no one that I was dating expected me to only be seeing them. I think there's this unspoken thing that I guess we're saying out loud in dating culture where it's okay to talk to and date multiple people before you are in a committed relationship. That doesn't work for everyone. Like, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh, I hate that," that's fine. That's totally fair. I think it's just good to be upfront about these things when you're in the early stages because I think most of us are operating on the like, I'm going to go on a first date with you, but I'm still on the apps talking to other people. Like, that's kind of how it goes right now, which again, I don't love that either. But I guess my approach was just accepting it instead of trying to go against it. And like I said, it took me a while to get there. Like, there were times where I was dating more than 3 people at once, and it was, like, way too much. I couldn't manage that. And also, you might not be able to manage that either, and that's fine. Like, 3 might be too much for you, and that's fine. It's not easy, right? It's a lot of time. So another question that came up was, how did you keep everyone straight when dating multiple people? I just didn't really run into this issue that much. I'm sure people have in the past where you confuse details, and I really don't think it's a big deal if it does happen. You know what? Like, okay, you don't remember if they had a sister or brother. You don't remember if they're from Michigan or Minnesota. You don't remember, it's like, okay, whatever. It's not a huge deal. It doesn't make you look great or anything, but I don't think it's like the biggest fumble you could make in dating if you do mix up a detail about someone's life because it could be just that you forgot. Like, and that does happen. So it sometimes you don't keep all the details straight even if you're not dating multiple people. So I don't think it matters as much as you think. Obviously, the goal is to keep everything straight and remember all the details, and that's what we want, but it's not gonna be perfect, and that's okay. I would save people's numbers in my phone, like Alex Hinge or David Tinder. So that would be how I didn't mix them up in my phones. And I use my Google Calendar to, for my scheduling. So I wasn't like mixing up places and times with anyone because I'm just a pretty organized person. But yeah, it was fine. I would say this did not really mess up anything in my dating journey at all. All right, next question. What did you do less of to make time for dating? This is an interesting question. I mean, look, I realize my lifestyle is different than other people's lifestyle. This would be like my typical schedule. Like on a weekday, I wake up, walk my dog, start working at like 8 a.m. We usually worked out during my lunch hour, usually called it quits around 3 or 4 p.m. Like, I own my own company at this time, right? I still do, but like it was a different company. I had employees. I didn't have to be on all day. I made it so that it was okay for me to bounce. That's just kind of, again, I was very lucky to have this setup. So usually 3 or 4 p.m., I'd call it quits. I start transitioning into my evening. I take my dog for a walk. I would get ready to go out for that night, whether I was going on a date or with friends. I'd go out, I'd come home, I'd eat dinner, watch TV, walk the dog, go to bed. It was a very typical schedule. And I think it's because, working from home all day by myself, I am a pretty productive person, but I also I would do chores. I also had cleaners come. My apartment was pretty small. It was pretty easy to manage. I was living alone. Also my company, my business had to do with meal prep. So that also, like, I had meals prepped ahead all the time. Didn't have to worry about that. I just had a lot of time thanks to a lot of these things I'm mentioning that allowed me to date this way. I didn't go on a date every single night, right? I also went climbing with friends. Those were the kind of my 2 alternate activities in the evening. It was either gonna be climbing at the climbing gym with my friends or going on a date or getting dinner with a friend. Like, those are kind of the rotations. Again, I didn't need that much alone time because I was working from home by myself all day, and I didn't wanna be alone at night. That would have driven me crazy. Like, I need a social interaction. So, yeah, that's how that worked for me. And it's funny because I didn't have a dog before. It's like I even had less time to date because I was a new dog mom. My dog, Coconut, who you might be able to see behind me if you're on YouTube, she's hiding. She's there. There she is. She came to me fully potty trained, so I didn't have to potty train her, which was nice. I rescued her, but I had to walk her, before and after I went out. So I made it work. And again, I realize how fortunate I am and how my lifestyle is very different. Obviously, I don't have kids. Like, if you're dating with kids, it's a whole other thing. If you have less control over your hours, it's a whole other thing. If you work a different hourly shift, like if you're a night shift person, it's a completely different challenge. And so I think I was just in a really good position to prioritize dating. And so that's what I did. Again, I realized how lucky I was. Another question was, did you budget for dating? I would say no, I did not budget for dating. Of course, I paid for dates too. Okay, I wasn't like just getting free meals the whole time. That's not what I'm about at all. I split plenty of dates and I covered the bill on plenty of dates too. But I would say that I wasn't going on really fancy dates. I wasn't going on anything that was going to cost me more than 50 bucks. Usually, I would prefer dates to be like coffee or like one drink. So if you're covering two drinks and tip in Seattle that was usually gonna be $50, which is a lot of money. It's a lot, but it's like it could be a lot more if it was dinner every time, and it just wasn't. A lot of times I just did like coffee and a walk, and that's like $15 total, maybe. And again, I just was at a point in my life where I didn't have to be tight with money. When I look back at where I was in my life, it's like I had been working on my business for 6 years and it was really doing well. So I was okay with money for at that point. All right, the big question, how did you go about sex? And I kind of mentioned this earlier. I wasn't having sex, like ongoing hooking up with multiple people at the same time. Like I wasn't having multiple sexual relationships like with various people overlapping in the timeline, if that makes sense. So basically, how I would do it is like if I was gonna hook up with someone, usually I just hooked up with someone one time and it wasn't ongoing. And there were only like 3 people, maybe 4, that hooked up with more than once in this journey because most of the dating experiences I had with people were so short. It was like 1 to 3 dates. I think I only got past date 4 with like 17 of 64 people, right? So, and I wasn't even hooking up with them at that point sometimes. So, a lot of the sexual experience I had in this journey were just the one time. It wasn't a one night stand. It was just like we would have 3 dates and I have sex and then it would just kind of fizzle or I would be like, no. And that's kind of how that went. Other things I did get tested, I think 3 times throughout the year. We use protection, like condoms and everything. I'm on birth control. It's like kind of like peace of mind for me. I just like have always had a habit of getting tested if I was single and hooking up with people. And I hope more people do that. And so I was able to talk about it with people. And now that I think about it, the reason I got tested so much, so there was one point where I was getting into a relationship with someone and we both got tested kind of before getting into that relationship basically. And then I did that again when I got into my relationship with my husband and then I probably got tested one more time in there. But yeah, I would say that in these sexual encounters I had, I would always bring up STI testing and ask them when they had their last tests, whatever. It's kind of not a fun conversation to have, but it's a necessary one that I really hope more people have as they're hooking up with people. And overall, I would say most of my sexual experiences were like mediocre to good. I only had one not great one, and just because we were incompatible. Like it wasn't like anything he did wrong. It just like we just didn't want the same things. We just didn't want the same experience, and that just wasn't great. But the rest were fine. There was one guy who, like, didn't wanna wear a condom, so I immediately ended things with him. I was like, "No, that's not gonna work for me." Can you talk about how you became attuned to knowing whether or not someone was a yay or a nay, a yes or a no? I think in the first half of my journey, I was not looking for anything serious. I was more about putting emotional distance between my breakup and where I was at that moment. Like, I knew that making connections with new people and having new experiences would help kind of buffer this space between the breakup and the pain of that and where I was in the present. And it did work. It didn't completely, heal my pain, obviously, but it did help. And again, I wasn't like hooking up with everyone, just like having experiences, having connections, flirting, getting to know people, being in their presence, like just being in a space with someone and with new. So I think, and that was the first part of my journey was just more like dating new people just to meet new people. And then as I became more ready for something serious, I think that I was pretty good at knowing who was going to be a match for me or not early on, at least within 5 dates. And I'm saying match not like for marriage, but just match for like, should we keep going? Do I want to pursue this person more? And usually by like date 4 or 5, if I even got that far with someone, I could find something that was like a big deal breaker. I'm thinking of specifically the times I dated men who were big drinkers or they had issues with their relationship to alcohol. And one was even like just a full blown alcoholic and was hiding it and everything. But that wasn't something I was going to pick up on the first date necessarily. It usually took a few repetitions to see how they behave with alcohol. And so, yeah, but I would say I got pretty good at knowing who wasn't a match for certain lifestyle things by like date 4 or 5. But again, that's still a lot of dates, right? Date 4 or 5, that's still like that's a lot. And in terms of, like, people who didn't get past the first date with, it was usually just because I didn't like being around them, and it's really that simple, right? It wasn't, like, some big red flag, and you can interpret that as, like, "Oh, she didn't feel the spark or she didn't feel chemistry." I don't really look at it that way. I look at it more like I just didn't vibe with them, and I wasn't looking forward to another date with them, so I didn't wanna have another date. Did you ever fall for 2 people and believe both could meet your needs? I would say fall for no. I wasn't falling for anyone in this journey. It wasn't like swept off my feet by anyone. I wasn't looking for that experience. I was looking to find someone who I wanted to be with for a long time, and that was like a more of a I was looking for a slow burn, right? Not a falling for type of experience. But I did, yeah, in the end, right? It was a few dates in with my husband. There was another guy in the picture, and if you were following me on Instagram, you might remember we had Blue Bubble and Green Bubble. And in Green Bubble, GB was my husband. And basically this refers to like one had an iPhone and one had an Android. So the iPhone guy's texts were blue and the Android guy, my husband, texts were green. And so, yeah, there were like, it just came down to these two people and they both were great. And at the time, it was like, well, I could see myself getting into a relationship with either one of these guys. But what happened was I double booked myself accidentally for dates with them. Like I accidentally said the same time and day and everything, kind of. Like they were overlapping a little bit. And I was like, I can try and move these to go to both of these dates. But then I was like, you know what? I'm not even really looking forward to the date with Blue Bubble. I'm only really looking forward to the date with Green Bubble, Johnny. And so that was a sign, right? So I was in that situation and it happened a few times, but it really came down to like, who was I looking forward to hanging out with more? And that was what guided me into that decision. How did you remain hopeful and positive throughout your dating journey? So I've talked about this a lot in other episodes, specifically episode 99, where I'm talking about how to embrace being single while also dating. And I think a couple of things. One, I just really enjoyed my single life. I was really happy single, and I wasn't trying to leave that life. I wasn't trying to end it. I didn't feel broken. I didn't have some story about how I was damaged in some way because I couldn't find a partner or something. It was like, no, I like my single life. I was very happy in it. So I didn't feel desperate, sorry to use the D word, to find a partner to bring me out of that single life. Like I was happy. So that's one thing. The second thing was that just that knowing my person was out there because I had met so many great people, which I talked about in part one. I met so many great people. I knew there were great people out there. I knew eventually I would find someone who would meet my needs, who I really liked to hang out with. And I did, right? I just had that belief. So again, I think not putting pressure on it is what made it easier for me to hold that belief because I wasn't constantly looking for ways to counter it, right? I didn't interpret all of the failed, in quotes, dates as a counter to the belief that I would find someone. It wasn't me proving myself wrong. I was accepting that this was the journey I had to go on. I had to meet a lot of people to find the right person. It's just part of it. So I think I use those experiences to support my belief instead of disproving it. And that's how I was able to stay hopeful and positive. How did you avoid dates being repetitive? So, yeah, if you've ever been on a lot of first dates, you might know that you're going to have the same conversations over and over. And I think there was a little bit of that for me. And I mean, the one thing that comes to mind is I definitely played with different ways of telling my story and different ways of talking about myself, right? I was testing how do I come off to people? Like, I was definitely playing with how do I present myself to people in a way that's authentic, but also like fun for me to share. So I would not going to say I changed my story or lied or anything like that, but it's like how you present the information about yourself can change from date to date and you can play with it. So I did that. And I also use this advice from Logan Ury, who's a wonderful dating coach and expert, where basically you start a date like you're talking to a friend. You kind of start in the middle. You just come in with like what happened that day as if you've known each other for years. And that helped me get out of the repetitive date cycle because I was bringing them into my world, into my present self and talking to them as if we knew each other versus like going through a series of the same questions every single date. That would never be fun, right? That's not fun. You don't want to have a series of questions you're doing every date. You want to bring them into your present and what's happening right now. So those are the two ways I avoided dates being repetitive. Also, sorry, third way, letting them talk about themselves a lot and asking a lot of questions because if you're the common denominator, if you're the constant, the other person is always new. So as long as you are listening and offering them the floor to talk about themselves, you are going to be hopefully entertained every time. Of course, there are some people who are a little more boring and that happens, but like you're going to get a different experience every time because it's a different person every time, if that makes sense. All right, moving on. The outfits. What was your rule of thumb? So I had a few go-to date outfits and honestly, I didn't switch it up too much. I just found the outfits that I felt the best in and just repeated those over and over because new people, I could wear the same outfit. They had never seen it. They didn't know. So I think the rule is find something that you feel comfortable in, like that you feel comfortable eating in, drinking in, moving in, walking, whatever it is, and that you feel good in, that you feel confident in. So I wasn't going to wear clothes that were like not fitting me right or too tight or like to making me feel like I have to like constantly tug and play with it and pull at it. I didn't want my clothes to take me out of the moment. So I wanted to just wear things that made me feel like me, that I knew I looked good in, that were comfortable. In terms of the actual outfit, it was usually like a tank top, a cardigan of some kind, or a jacket, jeans, boots, easy. Or like I had a few go-to sweaters that I wear like tucked in a little bit with boots. I'm not like a big dresses and skirts person, so I didn't really incorporate a lot of those. But and then in the summer, instead of jeans, I was wearing more like shorts. So I felt pretty good in my clothes. Also, Seattle was a pretty casual place. It's not hard to be fashionable in Seattle. No offense to Seattleites, I'm sorry. I would say I struggled more in New York City where it's like you feel like you need to dress to the nines when you're walking out to do errands. In Seattle was a little different. How did you stay safe? So, great question. Obviously, safety is a big concern in dating, whether you're using the apps or you're meeting people in person, you want to stay safe. For me, there are a couple things I did. One, always meeting in a public place. Two, never giving my address or allowing anyone to pick me up from my home. I also didn't allow people to walk me home after a date, especially the first date. After the first date, maybe I would allow them to walk me home, but like, not really. And those 3 things were enough to help me feel safe, but extra measures you could take would be telling a friend where you are and what time your date will be over so they know when to they're gonna hear from you, or, like, sharing your location with a friend so they can see where you are. Obviously, some people use, like, Google phone numbers to not give out their phone number, or you can just plan the date in the app so you never have to give your phone number. There are a lot of different ways you can do it. For me, the 3 things, again, were just meeting in public, not giving my address, and not allowing them to pick me up or walk me home from the date. Did you update your prompts as you went on dates? So this refers to dating apps and dating profiles, meaning like, did I change my profile while talking to people? Yes, of course I did. Absolutely, I did. I loved tweaking my profile. It was one of my favorite things to do. I probably changed something on it like every other day, which I don't advise that you do. That's not the way you should do it. I think changing your profile like once every 10 days, like just a prompt, not the whole thing, just like one thing is good, but I would constantly play with mine. And here's the thing, I know that this comes up a lot in the questions I get on Instagram. It's like, "Oh my god, I'm going out with someone and they updated their profile. Like, what does it mean?" It means they're still using the app, and that's it. It doesn't mean they're not into you. It doesn't mean that they don't like you. It doesn't mean they don't wanna see you. It just means they're also still using the app. Like, both can be true. Especially in early dating, expecting someone to just, like, delete the apps after a first or second date, I think is unrealistic. Could it happen? Yes. But that's just not how we date these days. It's just not the normal culture of dating. I'm more about just leaning into it versus trying to change it in this regard because I think that it's okay. It's okay to not commit after 2 dates. It's okay to not shut down the apps after 2 dates and stop your search because unfortunately people are flaky. No one ever mentioned this to me. No one ever said, "Hey, I noticed you changed your profile." No one ever commented. It didn't seem to be an issue even for Johnny, who, I went out with a couple people after we met. I was changing my profile and talking to people. He never asked. It just wasn't an issue, but maybe someone out there was, like, sad about it and looking at my profile. But this is why I advise don't look at their profile, like, don't check on it. Don't check on their social media. It's only feeding your anxiety and feeding stories that they're not into you or something where you need to just pay attention to how they're treating you, and what they do with their profile, I don't think has anything to do with how they're treating you. It's just part of the process of dating. It's like they don't know you well enough to put all of their eggs in your basket. Did you feel doubt when saying no? So, meaning like, did I feel doubt when I was rejecting people, when I was moving on from people? No. I'm a very decisive person. I've always been really decisive. I know exactly what I want. I feel weird when I don't know what I want, but I usually do. And I have confidence in my decisions. Even if I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing most of the time, but I'm so confident in my decisions. And I think that helped me a lot in my dating journey. And I really believe, like I said in part 1, there are no wrong decisions. You're gonna make decisions that eventually will lead you to the person when you're supposed to meet them at the right time and everything. So, yes, I did reject people who were great. Like, they were really solidly good people, just not for me. right? You could be the juiciest peach and then the person doesn't like peaches. It's like, it's okay that I rejected them. So yeah, no, I didn't feel doubt. There was one scenario where I did go back to someone I moved on from. Like I went back, we had 3 dates, and a few months later, I reached out and was like, would you want to kind of get a drink? And he said that he was in a relationship. So that's okay. It's all right. How did you not let your past trauma affect your journey? Who's to say I didn't? It absolutely did. It absolutely affected my journey, especially once I got into a relationship. I mean, that's when I really felt the most anxiety. It was not in the dating process, it was after committing. There was just so much pressure and all of the trauma I had in my previous relationship with, my attachment wounds from childhood. That's when it all came up. It wasn't during the dating process. So, it definitely affected my journey, and I think my trauma stopped me from getting into a relationship, like, sooner with my husband. It caused me to go a little slower and be a little, like, more resistant because I was scared of repeating past pain. So, yes, it affected my journey. I think it affects everyone's journey, and that's part of dating, unfortunately. When you wanted to give up on dating, what did you do? I don't think I ever had a moment where I wanted to give up because I was enjoying myself. I was having fun. But I did take a break after, a 2-monther. I took a break. Also, it was December. I didn't feel like it was a great time for me to be dating. I was like away from Seattle, and so for me, when I took that break, I set a date for when I would come back to the apps, and that helped me not feel FOMO, fear of missing out. It helped me not feel that because I knew I was going to come back to the apps and turn my profile back on and start meeting people again. I knew I didn't it would be there. It would be waiting for me when I was ready. So that helped me kind of not feel like, "Oh no, like I'm missing out on all these great people in the 1 month I'm not on the apps." Like I was like, "Nope, take your time. It'll be there when you're ready. You're gonna rejoin January 1st, whatever it was." And that is what I did. And it worked really well for me. All right, we got 3 more questions. Did you experience anxiety about the outcome when you hit the 4th date? So we all know getting past 3 dates is like a big deal at early dating. No, I don't think I felt anxiety at that point. I think I felt the most anxiety when it was like the define the relationship time because that to me was scary. Commitment was scary to me. Commitment is still scary to me, even though I'm married. So yeah, that's when I felt the most anxiety. How did you stay well mentally and not get sad? So I actually wrote a response to this on Instagram that I'm going to read because it really hit with people. So here is how I stayed well mentally and didn't get too sad. The first thing is that I like dating as an activity and I wasn't trying to find someone. So I was open to getting into a relationship, but I did date just to date. I liked getting dressed up. I liked going out after work. I loved talking to people. And that helped me not feel devastated when I met people who weren't it. It was part of the process. And I kind of relate this to working out. Like if you go to the gym and lift a few weights and expect to feel and see a difference right away, you're going to be disappointed. But if you find some kind of form of exercise that you actually like doing so that the process is fun, you're going to get to your goal because you are enjoying the process. It's not necessarily about hitting your goal. The second thing was staying grounded in reality and not interpreting someone else's behavior as a reflection on my worth. When you don't blame yourself for their shitty behavior, you're not going to experience a lot of pain. It's more like you're going to experience gratitude for them showing who they are early. And I'm encouraging you to not beat yourself up for the crap behaviors of other people. This is about not beating yourself up for the shitty behavior of other people. Okay. So that was another thing that helped me not feel sad. I wasn't interpreting someone ghosting me or rejecting me or treating me a certain way as like, oh, that must mean my worth. No, it was about them. They were going to treat someone that way no matter who they were dating. The third thing is that I knew that every single no got me closer to a yes. So if a guy didn't want a relationship, cool, on to the next. He had an alcohol issue, okay, not for me, next. He didn't believe in empathy, okay, nope, not for me, on to the next, and so on. I literally did that until I met my husband over 60 times, right? It's just everything that doesn't work out is gonna get you closer to a yes, and that helped me not feel sad about it. The fourth one is I was ready to be single for the rest of my life, which I've talked about before. I mapped out my entire life, what it would look like as a single person and what the best version of that would be. And that gave me a lot of security and safety. I didn't need it to work out with anyone because I knew If I was single for the rest of my life, I knew exactly what I'd have to do to feel fulfilled and happy. And I still feel that way, even though I'm married, right? Like, obviously, something could happen to my marriage, and I would be really sad if it did. It would be devastating. But I know in the long run, I would be okay. And this made the ups and downs of dating a lot easier for me to stomach. I didn't make being single a story about how I was broken. I made it a story about how I could live the best version of my life no matter what. I didn't need the dates to work out, and that really helped me not feel sad. The fifth one is support system. So, in addition to everything I just said, I also had therapy, my friends, my family, my work, exercise, my dog. Having my own space and a solid self care routine also helped me a lot. And my dating life was just one small slice of the pie. So, if it wasn't going well, it wasn't like my whole life wasn't going well. It was just one little part. And look, you don't need to have everything I just listed to feel this way, right? This is where a gratitude practice could be helpful, where you're focusing more on what you have, not what you don't. And so, those are some of the things that help me not feel sad. Of course, I experience ups and downs, but thanks to having these things in place, they just did not affect me as much as maybe they're affecting other people. Again, you don't have to have all the above for that to work, but I hope that me sharing that helps you kind of put things into perspective, because being single isn't the worst thing in the world. Being in a relationship isn't always better than being single. And having dates not work out doesn't mean that you're not dateable, and it doesn't mean that you're not worthy or not deserving or anything like that. It just means they're not your match. That's all it means. All right, and the last question is there anything you would have done differently? Yes, I definitely wouldn't have gone on so many dates. Let's be real, 64 first dates is unnecessary, and that is not what I want you to do. I don't want you to take away from the story that I have that, like, you need to go in as many first dates as you want. A lot of those first dates could have been a phone call. Okay? Like, a lot of those first dates could have not happened because it was like right off the bat I knew it wasn't going to work for some reason. So yeah, I would have gone on fewer first dates. I would have done more phone screening calls. I would have screened people a little bit more. I would have been a little more discerning on the apps when messaging with people. I think I did what I did because I wanted to get that muscle of dating, but I don't think I needed to go on that many dates at all. And I think that's the main thing I would have done differently. I think I just would have maybe gone on half the amount of dates that I went on. All right. Thank you so much for listening, for sticking with this one. This was probably my least scripted podcast I've done. So I appreciate you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this more candid little episode for you. And again, if you have more questions or comments, you can always reach out to me on Instagram at dating.intentionally. You can comment on YouTube, on Spotify. You can email me at datingintentionallypod@gmail.com. I'm here for you. I'm rooting for you. And I really hope that this episode helped. Thanks again for listening. I would love it if you share this episode with someone who is navigating dating and needs a little bit of inspiration or a confidence boost or some tough love. If any of these episodes have helped you in your journey, you can help me by leaving a stunning review on Apple or giving Dating Intentionally 5 stars on Spotify. I'd really appreciate it. Once again, I'm Talia. This has been Dating Intentionally, and I'll catch you next time.